Welcome to Keep the Line Moving, the podcast where leadership meets life and inspiration.
Inspires, connects, and helps others grow.
Here we spotlight extraordinary leaders.
Be someone that people look up to and want to work with and want to see succeed.
We're diving deep into how they inspire, motivate, and lead with strategy and empathy.
Company culture and their philosophy, what they value.
To achieve the extraordinary. Here we go. A new open, a new look, a new year. That's right, everybody. Keep the Line Moving Season 3. Here we go. John Tarnoff is our guest. He's an author. He wrote the book Boomer Reinvention in 2017. He's done a TEDx talk back in 2012. His specialty, executive coaches for folks later in their career. What we talk about today will be useful to anyone as they adjust and re-examine where they're going in their careers, right? John's philosophy, build relationships, not jobs. This is personal. John was my executive coach from 2021 to 2023. Obviously, we remain friends. Today, we're going to talk about his lengthy film career. That's right. He was in film production prior to transitioning himself into working with people. He then got a master's in spiritual psychology. But let me just give you a little behind the scenes of some movies he worked on. Pink Floyd, The Wall, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Diner. He's worked with Clint Eastwood, as well as on the set of Poltergeist. So many stories. But why do you care? Because he transitioned himself and found his next passion. A wonderful conversation with somebody close to me and will provide value to you. The conversation begins now with John Tarnoff. All right, everybody. Season 3 debuts. So, John, I ask people in season 1 and 2, when they get introduced to people, how do they introduce themselves? What do you say because of your varied background?
It's such a pleasure to be here. I just have to say, I was present at the birthing of this podcast, so I consider myself something of a godfather to this podcast. And
Yes.
I am so thrilled to be here and to have watched you over these past few years grow this podcast, grow your leadership coaching practice. So let's get that out of the way. To answer your question, so who am I? So I now think of myself as a career transition coach, working with people across career transitions, primarily in mid-career. So this is 45 to 55, a little bit on either side of that. But people who are facing a very significant midlife, mid-career question about their meaning, their purpose, their value as professionals, and how they are going to develop and maintain meaningful, purposeful careers for as long as they want to pursue them.
When we started working together, we dove into everything. It's improving. I was still at the Jets where let's improve your acumen as a professional, as an executive producer, vice president, but also see where you want to contribute to the world. Having gotten a master's degree, teaching at NYU, the complexities of my situation, but I want to make this useful for everybody.
Right.
So when you first work with people, you're assessing the ikigai, right? And I'll let you explain that. I love how you always bring that up, but
Sure.
Explain when you see somebody and they're ready to do something, transition, enhance their abilities.
Right.
Did your process work?
There are two principles for me around career transition, particularly at this stage. The first principle is that the career you want is already inside you. If you are wrestling with this question of what should I be doing, if you're feeling that you are no longer motivated, inspired in the work that you do, that you've kind of run out of a ramp to move forward, or you are in a career, in a real transition between jobs, and you have lost or left the position that you were in, and you are searching for another one, and you are going through this very difficult, dehumanizing process of getting hired in the 2020s, unfortunately, you may be at a crossroads and feel like your confidence is shot. That career is already in there. It is the synthesis of everything that you believe in, stand for, have accomplished, want to accomplish. It synthesizes your values, your preferences, your hobbies, your relationships, all of the things that you hold dear, particularly as you have gotten into this mid-career period. You're experienced, you know what you know, you're kind of at the top of your performance in so many ways, even though in many ways the world is telling you, well, aren't you kind of done? Or aren't you kind of too old for this? We're looking for, some, 20 something, 30 something, because we feel like, oh, we need new blood. All the cliches. The second principle is, and this kind of gets into the issues of confidence. The second principle is that in order to create the future, you have to reconcile the past. And this goes to the idea of baggage, that we've all accumulated a certain amount of baggage by the time we get into mid-career. Decisions that we would rather not have made, bridges that we may have burned, people who have done us wrong. And in order to keep going, we have to reconcile, resolve, make peace with all of our past missteps, because otherwise we're going to carry those with us into every single meeting. And it's not going to be pretty. People are going to go, they're good. They've kind of check all the boxes, but there's something about them. I don't know. Let's go elsewhere. So that's the start. And you were alluding to the Ikigai, which is this Ikigai, this Japanese concept of life's purpose. And it has been translated into the West through this well-distributed Venn diagram that contains these 4 questions. What do I love to do? What do I do well? What does the world need? I adopt that into what does my world need? Because I think the world is much too large a question. What does my world need? And what can I get paid for? So at the intersection of those 4 questions, seems to me, is the starting point for figuring out what your future is going to be from this point forward.
And you look at it, John, there are so many people that are carrying around that baggage that you alluded to. And the baggage is not their fault, right? It is just an accumulation of experiences, right? It's life, it's relationships. Sure, go ahead.
I will say it's not their fault. I'm not a blame person, but I am a responsibility person. And I am something of a stoic about this, that we really need to take responsibility for everything that's happened to us in our lives. Not that we are at fault or to blame, but we have to be responsible for how we're going to deal with it. So I like to say your attitude about the issue is your issue. And if you have a growth-minded attitude about this and you take responsibility and say, look, here's what I did, here's what I didn't do, and I'm going to learn from that experience and bring that forward, you're putting yourself in a much better position than if you're trying to hide from the past or hide from your failings.
It's soul cleansing. To own your journey, to own your mistakes. As you know, my son is 17. He's about to go to college next year. We're, figuring out which college he's going to go to and all that great stuff.
In there.
And we told him when he was a little tiny guy, when he started talking, our main house motto is always tell the truth. Just tell the truth. And that means looking in the eye of the person, the teacher, the coach, the whatever, and just let it rip. Just tell the truth. And then you can always react accordingly. And you can't control how someone takes that information. Well, now he's getting older, and hopefully that sticks with him when he goes to college. Anyway, professionally, it's the same situation. How have you seen folks work through that, where the other side of doing that, meaning I'm going to own this. I'm not going to blame. I'm going to own my mistakes. I'm going to own my skill. I'm going to own my contributions. And I'm going to own the fact that I was at a job for 3.5 months, or I have a hole in my resume. No one cares.
Right.
How have you seen that?
It doesn't make sense to kind of point to a particular example. I think this is something that everyone has to do for themselves. I kind of lay this out up front in my initial conversation with a potential client. So they're going to understand that this is a engagement where it's going to go deeper, and where I'm going to ask people to be self-reflective, and that through that self-reflection, they're going to actually build the confidence that they are looking for and that they may feel they're lacking. Some people don't go for it. Some people will kind of glaze over when I start talking about this stuff because they don't want to go there. They want to figure out, well, what's the trick? What's the button that I have to push to get that position, right? What do I have to say on my resume to get that interview?
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So
Yeah,
let's back up a little bit. So I discovered you. You did an interview on the CBS Morning Show, and it was plastered on your plastered. It was featured on your. There's a Freudian slip there, right? That's just that's you always telling me, Chris. You got to shout from the rooftops on the things you need to do and the things you've accomplished.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, I launched the book on CBS this morning. It was great.
I was
great. Very privileged to do that, but sure, I'm going to talk about it.
So anyway, but I could tell that you were somebody that I could identify with because you're no BS. You're straight to the point and you're very honest. And I could tell that you were going to get the best out of me. So that's how we got in contact and started going back in 2021. Okay, we've covered that. So what I'm saying though, John, is you're a person that is speaking from credibility. So let's back up a little bit. I'm going to, first of all,
how did I get here?
How did you get here? Exactly. But first of all, I'm going to forgive you for wearing the Los Angeles Dodgers hat. Actually, I got to be honest, and all my San Francisco friends, as a native San Franciscan, third generation Giants fan, I used to work there for goodness sakes. But I have to say that team is so likable. Sorry, everybody. I'm just being honest. It's all about telling the truth. Oh, my God. Ohtani and Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts.
Obviously, this has been a good year for the Dodgers. We're recording this after the World Series, the end of 2024. So, yeah, pretty remarkable. And I'm a native New Yorker. I've been in Los Angeles for the last 40 years. So I kind of live in two worlds. I mean, my dad was Brooklyn born and raised. He was a Dodgers fan. When I kind of was, I guess by the time I was old enough to go to a baseball game, they had already moved out to LA. And, one of my early experiences with my father, I must have been 7 years old, is him taking me to a Yankees game. So that Yankee ethos is baked into me. And yet I've been out in LA for the last 40 years. So, I got to pick a side, and this is my home. This is my home team.
Now you got me talking about baseball. I don't want to derail us because we'll start talking about that for 4 hours, which I enjoy doing.
All right, so I'm going to take off the hat, and we will get back into talking about career.
Yeah, and you still look great. All right, so let's look at this. The reason you're in Los Angeles is a fascinating one. So
great segue,
please,
Chris Gargano.
Please.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I came to LA to get into the entertainment business. I was a filmmaker as a teenager, and making films with my friends. Did that through college and started working summers in New York City on commercial crews as a production assistant, and got the bug and thought, okay, I got to go to film school. So I went out to California, went to UCLA Film School as a grad student, got very bored very quickly, and quit UCLA after 3 quarters, I guess, and pounded pavement to get my first job. And I wanted to be on the production side. And I did that pretty much up until the early 90s, and worked for studios, worked on my own, worked at MGM and Columbia and Warner Brothers, and co-founded a company called Village Roadshow Pictures, which became much, much bigger after I left it. And then got into tech in the 90s. Tech really turned my head. And I took a kind of a sabbatical out of movies to go into CD-ROM development and games, and had a partner, and we started a little company and raised money into the tech bubble. And then spring of 2001, the NASDAQ tanked, and we tanked along with it, and all of the deals went away and the financing went away. And I was sitting at home thinking, okay, so what am I going to do now? So I didn't know what to do. And I decided to go back to school. And this was kind of an epiphany moment for me to decide to do this, to earn my psychology degree, because I wanted to make some kind of a change. And I knew that I needed to shake everything up And so I did that, and miraculously, coming out of the first year of that program through interestingly, a lot of techniques which I since have adopted into my coaching program, I wound up at DreamWorks Animation, where I was for most of the 2000s. But I was in a people role, which is really what I wanted to move out of content and into people, because I realized that what was really going on for me is that all through the work that I had done, even though it was about production and about projects and deal making and all that, it was about the people. It was about the talent. This is a business that runs on talent, and it's all about that. Is the lingua franca of entertainment, is talent. So, and talent is all about people. So that became the full circle for me. And once I left DreamWorks, it became the kind of standard bearing process of getting me into coaching people on careers. It wasn't immediately apparent to me that that's what I was going to end up doing, but it makes perfect sense in retrospect.
When you were working with the people at DreamWorks, and did you see transformational changes take place with them?
Absolutely. And that was really the inspiring thing, because initially when I went in there, and I think they hired me, they didn't have a job for me. They hired me because someone who worked there thought I would be an interesting hire, and he kept introducing me to people there, and I kept having these meetings and asking them questions and making suggestions and kind of questioning a lot of what was going on there, because they were coming out of startup mode, and they had a very, very ambitious agenda. And I had some ideas about this, and a lot of that had to do with people, had a lot to do with staff. I mean, it's a company of artists and technologists, people who are essentially drawing pictures and then creating the technology to make those pictures move. So it really, I had this amazing experience of working with people across the creative and the technology staff around how to go up to the next level of their careers. And I kind of became known as someone to go to with these kinds of questions about, well, how do I get out of this department? How do I get promoted? How do I add additional skill sets that are going to make me more valuable? And that really became a kind of a proving ground for me for a lot of the work that I do now as a career coach.
So I can speak from experience. So I've been one of those people that have benefited from your talent in this category. What about you allows you to be successful as a career coach? Now, usually I'll ask a person that,
Right,
not having firsthand knowledge. I'm going to give my opinion that I'm
sure.
going to have you answer, because
Should
unfortunately,
we write this down on pieces of paper and see if we get the same answer?
So here's the key, because I also do this, but I'm in a different category than you.
But I think we probably have the same answer.
Okay. It's listening.
That's
You're a
right.
fantastic
That's exactly right. It's
listener.
It's all about listening.
It's all about listening. But here's another key
Chris,
that you have.
Chris, everything is about listening.
It is. Everything is about listening. Oh, we talk about this, as you know, because you're a loyal fan of the podcast, all the time, is about listening. And then, John, here's something that executives that are hopefully listening right now, they're driving in the Bay Area, New York City, Los Angeles on the 5, whatever, whoever's listening to this right now. It's also about your ability to remain emotionally calm. And from the film industry, and then me in professional sports, you'd think, and we saw, it's very high emotions and egos and winning and losing and giant budget pictures and things of that nature. Right. And you'd think, okay, I'm justified in being very emotional. There's nothing wrong with the passion, but when emotion gets negative and impacts the folks' ability to do their job, that is the crux of the issue. Fair, John?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting question, because as you're talking about that emotionality question, well, I guess I would say that there's a difference between emotional and emotionality. That when you kind of prize emotionality for the sake of emotionality, that can get into problems, right? But the other thing that I was thinking as you were talking was that it really is the people who are cool under fire that teach us a lot and who are the leaders. I mean, everyone in athletics across the board who has that calm, that concentration, they're in that zone. That's a model for everyone else. Everything is about getting through the day. This is a job. We're all here to work. And we're all here to support the vision. And that's what's going on. So it's very, very orderly. It's very calm. It's very relaxed, even if it is moving very quickly.
Clint Eastwood is a director, as you know.
Great example.
Right, John? I've
Great
studied
example.
Clint Eastwood. Right.
I've been on his set. I don't know if is it a clip where he talks about this, or someone talks about this who's worked with him, where they say, I'll say what Clint does, he goes, twirling my finger in the air,
Right.
as opposed to yelling, roll camera, right? And then he'll just kind of gesture with his hand to the actor when everyone's ready, and he'll kind of gesture to the actor, and the actor will start the scene as opposed to action, right? So, and I've seen a lot of people work that way. I think Spielberg works that way a lot, particularly with kids, when he's worked with kids. And I was on Poltergeist, and I saw him work with that little girl in Poltergeist. I think when you have a certain amount of experience and a sense of command over what you know, right? You don't have to be over the top about it. You just show up and do your work. Or as we say, hit your mark.
How many, John? So let's talk about your mark. Let's take the rest of our time together to be unbelievably useful for folks out there that could benefit from your services. But if they can't hire, or they don't have the means or the time or the inclination to hire an executive coach or a transition coach, let's give them some practical advice, whether they're 25 or 65. Sure. Okay. Are you ready? Let's dive in here.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what is the world telling us? Meaning, you're getting clients, or you're interviewing clients and seeing if it's a fit. What is the world going through right now from a hiring standpoint? Let's just call it what it is, ageism. And what is the hiring and the industry, the corporate world? We don't want to go international. We'll be here for 7 years, but just in America, please.
I'll just give you a few responses to that. The first one, getting very practical, is you want to be talking about achievements, not about roles and responsibilities. We were raised on the idea that you structure a resume around what you did. How many people did you manage? What was the size of that department? What were you tasked with doing? And people want to know what you accomplished. They don't want to know what your responsibilities were. Everybody's got a set of responsibilities, but how did you move the needle? The task of both getting a job as well as keeping a job has to do with, to me, being an owner, having an owner's mindset. If this were your business, how would you behave? We have to take greater responsibility for the positions that we're in and for delivering results versus being a good boy or girl, showing up and doing what's in the job description. The other thing is collaboration. And I know this is one of your famous end of session seven questions. So the collaboration question is increasingly important because the work that we do is increasingly networked and less hierarchical. So it is no longer about pleasing your manager and just being under the direction of that single person in the hierarchy. You're actually working for your colleagues, not for that manager. And the manager should be working for you in an ideal department. So the org chart really has changed a lot. And I don't think that we have really talked about that a lot or enough in business culture. I think we're still operating, for the most part, despite what the consulting companies in their, in many ways, enlightened prescriptions are telling us to do, most managers are still top down, and they are playing dominant games with their staff, trying to lead through control as opposed to through collaboration. So those are two ideas about what I think is going on in the workplace that are making people crazy.
All right. What about this, John? Somebody comes to you, a potential client, or you've signed them up, and you can tell, let's say in meeting 3, right? You have your sessions with them, when someone is not meant to work in a box, where they're either outgrowing or it's just not for them anymore, a corporate position, but they're fighting to stay in it, right? For good reasons. They want to pay a mortgage. They want to put their kids through school. They want to make sure they're there for their people, whatever the case may be. But you can tell they're not meant for this anymore. They should probably be in an entrepreneurial role somewhere else. How do you say that? I'm putting you on the spot, but you can handle it. How do you
Sure.
say that to somebody?
I don't feel like you're putting me on the spot at all. I think that this is a important question that we all have to be more mindful of in our work, and that is, are we a fit today? You want to be looking at the trends that you see around you in terms of whether you're a fit or not. And you know this story. So my big realization around this, and back to walking my talk, I basically fired myself from my DreamWorks job because the work that I had been hired to do and that had evolved over the 6 years that I was there was kind of done. And somewhere around the end of 2008, 2009, I began to feel like I didn't have a purpose anymore there, that there was nothing new for me to do, and that I was in a placeholder role. I really wanted to do what I'd been doing, which was ultimately what led me into the coaching practice. But it was time for me to leave. And I really, really didn't want to go because I loved working there. I loved the people. It's a great campus right near me here in Glendale, and it was just perfect. But it was time. And I think that represents to me the kind of process that I think we all have to do. We all have to evaluate how things are going. When someone says, oh, did you hear we're going public, or there's a merger, or whatever is going on, but it's not going to affect us, think again. It's always going to affect you. So we have to be proactive. We have to be kind of clear, and we have to be willing to make a difficult decision, which might be to leave. But in a healthy company, there might be another opportunity. So again, this gets back to what I call the superpower. What is your superpower? What is that combination of skills, experiences, places where you're really dangerous, where you're good at what you do, you're uniquely qualified, you have a particular angle on getting things done, whatever it might be. What is that? What is that value proposition? Double down on that. It's going to serve you well in your current job. It's going to serve you well in your next job and the job after that. But it really comes down to, again, concentrating on you and what you do almost as a consultant, no matter where you work or how you're getting paid. You want to think of yourself as that consultant providing value to a client, not as an employee taking directions from a manager.
Very insightful, and I am sure you are helping people with your words today.
Yeah, I mean, we covered kind of a lot of ground in that answer, so it's maybe a little bit hard to unpack, but it's back to responsibility, self-responsibility. That's the biggest challenge for all of us, and to be able to look adversity in the face and go, I can handle this, and I better get ahead of this, because if I don't get ahead of it, it's gonna just wipe the floor with me.
Yep. Courage, John. Tapping into your own courage,
Yeah. And courage is like confidence is in retrospect. You talk to any number of people who are supposedly courageous, and they will say, I just did what I had to do. It didn't occur to me that I was being courageous. I just had to do this. I had no other choice.
We will get to all-star moments in just a second. To grow as a leader, you must make intentional choices about how you want to show up for yourself and your team. Are you ready to grow your leadership? The Gargano Leadership Group offers expert coaching, consulting, and workshops rooted in our 4 leadership pillars: curiosity, alignment, optimism, and self-awareness. Leadership starts with forging authentic connections, communicating your values, leading with energy and enthusiasm, and truly understanding yourself. Visit garganoleadership.com to get started with us today. Back to the show. All right, are you ready for the aforementioned
Absolutely.
all-star moments to close us out, John?
Absolutely.
A lot of wisdom here. You and I could talk for hours. All right, here we go. Your favorite film of all time?
I actually think The Matrix is my favorite film.
Okay, you did a film on Pink Floyd at one point in time.
I did.
We could, again, spend an hour on that. Favorite rock band of all time, John?
Oh, The Who.
All right, now we're going to go to some traditional questions.
Okay.
What gives you fuel, John Tarnoff?
Right. Sleep, meditation, and reading.
What does never give up mean to you, John?
We're put here for a reason. We don't really know what that reason is. Life is short, so we have to drink it up.
You've hired hundreds of people. You've recommended people. You've connected people. We've gone over this, but let's crystallize it.
Yeah.
The number one characteristic you think in 2025 that will help people get hired is what?
Ask more questions, make fewer statements.
And lastly, John, we'll close it with this. Describe yourself as a leader in one sentence.
Well, I hope that I am this person, but I think of as a leader as someone that you want to follow because you feel as if they're following you.
That was outstanding, John. Thank you so much, John. And listen, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you.
And we thank John very much for coming on the show. I have several takeaways from this conversation. Number one, command and control leadership still goes on. It's hard to believe, but as John said, and his quote was, it's making people crazy. If you are in an environment and are being led by a command and control type leader, what can you do to combat that or make it better? John said, build relationships, not jobs, and think like an entrepreneur or a consultant. Provide value to the company or the organization, work well with others, other stakeholders, and set an example. Be the change, right? I get asked all the time by my NYU students, what do you do when you're in a situation where the culture is bad? How can you change that culture? It's very difficult at certain levels of organizations, in my opinion, and John would agree, to change the culture. However, John's advice is amazing, which is take care of your superpower. Find out what it is, add that value, and work to understand your peers and be a great teammate. You cannot lose if you take that approach. We thank John so much for coming on the show. What an interesting story, his transition from working in film to being an executive coach. Maybe you have the same type of transition in you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week on Keep the Line Moving. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwhal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.